The most unlikely military training program in modern history is happening right now across the United Kingdom.
That's going to be, again, Zelensky. Then you're going to have President Trump, Vice President Vance, as well as the NATO Secretary General, again, representing European interests. And then there's a third call with Zelensky and a coalition of willing EU governments, UK and Canada. So what you have here is a full day of sort of ramp up to this summit, with all of these leaders wanting to be in the ear of President Trump, because I can't underscore enough that this was right now a bilateral meeting between President Trump and President Putin. And President Zelensky very much wants to be at that table. European leaders also want to be at that table. But for right now, the president says he wants to look Vladimir Putin in the eye and see if he's really interested in a peace deal, Anna.
Matt, what are Zelensky and European leaders hoping to accomplish today in this phone call? Is this a final chance to persuade President Trump on certain things before he meets with Putin?
Well, it certainly looks that way, Anna, at least in terms of a big sort of combined effort. So what we're seeing today, I would characterize as a full court press by the Western alliance to ensure that the interests of Europe and Ukraine are protected at this summit on Friday.
More than 56,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained by the UK and 13 partner nations on Operation Interflex. And here's the strange part. Many of these Western instructors have never fought a war like the one they're preparing Ukraine's troops for. Yet somehow it's working brilliantly. Today we're diving deep into this fascinating paradox that's reshaping modern warfare. To understand why this matters, we need to grasp just how different Ukraine's war is from anything the West has seen in decades. The West hasn't fought a major war against a powerful, industrialized military in decades. Most NATO combat experience in recent memory comes from the counterinsurgency and counterterrorism campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, where Western forces enjoyed air superiority and faced smaller, less equipped adversaries. Some Interflex trainers weren't even in Iraq or Afghanistan, having joined after those conflicts ended. Contrast that with Ukraine's reality. Ukraine is battling one of the world's largest militaries in a grinding, high-casualty war with no control of the skies. Russia's relentless artillery fire, missile strikes, and widespread use of drones have reshaped the battlefield in ways NATO has not faced for generations, or in some cases at all. So here's the mind-bending situation. Ukrainian troops are arriving at these British training camps straight from the front lines. They've survived trench warfare, drone swarms, and constant artillery bombardment.
On the front line are in agreement.
To just give away, how many people have died? You understand how many people have died? Just to give away? Give away to whom? Give away for what?
But some think a ceasefire and bolstering their current defences is needed.
They are already lost. These territories are lost. It will take hundreds of years to restore them. Not dozens, but hundreds. The coming generations will have to take care of them.
For those in the Donbass region, the prospect of two men thousands of miles away forcing them from their homes and communities is unthinkable.
We all, people I know, will have to leave. But frankly speaking, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Meanwhile, their instructors might have learned their craft in the very different conflicts of Iraq and Afghanistan, or worse yet, never seen combat at all. You'd think this would be a recipe for disaster. How can someone who's never experienced modern peer-to-peer warfare teach someone who's lived it? But Colonel Boardman, commanding officer for Operation Interflex, sees it differently. He told Business Insider that the UK's Ministry of Defence is well aware of this unusual dynamic. And far from being a disadvantage, the training program ends up with the sum being much greater than the parts, which is really valuable for us. The key lies in what Boardman calls institutional credibility. While individual trainers might lack recent combat experience, NATO has decades of accumulated military doctrine, training methodologies, and battlefield analysis. What Operation Interflex does brilliantly is combine this institutional knowledge with Ukraine's real-time combat experience. Here's where it gets really interesting. Ukrainian soldiers bring a lot of valuable military experience to the training. That experience often challenges NATO's best practices and leads to adjustments. The Western officials and instructors behind Interflex are approaching it with a humility of approach that allows us to provide our opinions and our ideas and our teaching, but also learn from some of the feedback that we get. This creates a fascinating feedback loop. For example, when learning casualty evacuation, Ukrainians sometimes reject NATO's extraction techniques, explaining that in their war, it may be safer to wait until nightfall to move the wounded. In trench warfare lessons, Ukrainians sometimes correct their instructors based on tactics they used in combat just weeks earlier. Those insights are then incorporated into the training. The numbers speak for themselves across this remarkable program.
Describing that call with Zelensky as very friendly, saying it was a 10 out of 10. The president also said after Friday's summit with Putin, there could be another meeting with all three leaders, himself, Zelensky, and Putin. Of course, the president also repeatedly calling it President Biden's war. Of course, that war beginning when Russia invaded Ukraine. So let's get to senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, who joins us now from the Kennedy Center. Gabe, walk us through the highlights here.
Hi there, Zen Clay. Well, the president was here at the Kennedy Center, remaking this cultural institution, announcing a list of honorees. That's why he was here, but he took a series of questions on a variety of different topics, including the war in Ukraine and that highly anticipated meeting between himself and Vladimir Putin, now set for Friday at a military base in Anchorage, Alaska. As you mentioned, I asked him how his series of calls with European allies and President Zelensky went this morning. Again, he said it was a 10 out of 10, but then significantly, he said that he wanted a trilateral summit between himself, President Putin, and President Zelensky, quote, almost immediately if this meeting on Friday goes well. It's unclear the details of how that would happen.
Recent polling data reveals that 90% of all the trainees who have completed Interflex training since January 2025 feel more confident in their lethality and survivability at the end of training. The polling also revealed that one of the most valued elements of the training is the battlefield first aid, with 93% of basic recruits saying they felt more confident about treating casualties after receiving the training. But why does this unusual arrangement work when logic suggests it shouldn't? The answer lies in understanding what each side brings to the table. NATO instructors provide systematic training methodologies, standardized procedures, and institutional knowledge built over decades. They know how to break down complex military skills into teachable components. Ukrainian soldiers, meanwhile, bring something invaluable. They know what actually works under fire. Ukraine's expertise with drones, particularly the first-person view attack drones, has been especially valuable, especially considering the changes to the operating environment since Iraq and Afghanistan. While the UK has drone operators and instructors, we are not currently at war, so we are not developing them at the same pace that the Ukrainians are. This creates what military strategists call a learning laboratory. Western doctrine provides the foundation, but Ukrainian experience refines and updates it in real time. It's like having the world's best textbook constantly updated by students who are living the subject matter. The scope of Operation Interflex is staggering. On 17th June 2022, during a visit to Kiev, Prime Minister Boris Johnson offered Ukraine a new training program, this time located within the UK, with the aim of training up to 10,000 Ukrainians every 120 days. Delivered in locations throughout the UK, the program takes volunteer recruits who have joined the armed forces of Ukraine with little to no previous military experience and teaches them the skills required for frontline combat. The training allows Ukraine's forces to accelerate their deployments, rebuild their forces, and scale up their resistance as they continue to defend their nation against Russian invaders. The training isn't just basic infantry skills either. The vital training offered by the UK Armed Forces extends far beyond just basic infantry training. Over the last 2.5 years, we have supported training on UK-supplied equipment, teaching Ukrainian medics life-saving battlefield medicine, and running a 2-week training course for Ukrainian military chaplains, as they offer vital spiritual and pastoral support to those on the front line. What makes this even more remarkable is the international cooperation involved. These countries include Canada, New Zealand, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Australia, and Romania. This week, the British Ministry of Defense announced that Albania, a NATO member state, joined Operation Interflex as the 13th participant. Each nation brings its own expertise. Finland, for example, brings forest warfare expertise to Interflex that Ukraine lacks. The training sites themselves are designed to replicate the harsh realities Ukrainian soldiers will face. The training site includes a reproduction of a Russian trench system as seen on the battlefields in eastern Ukraine. As AFU soldiers in singles and pairs take turns assaulting the enemy under the guidance of military trainers and translators, blank rounds are fired and returned as smoke from nearby fires swirl through the air. An audio recording loudly plays the simulated screams of injured soldiers and cries of civilians, adding another disturbing layer of immersion. But here's what's truly fascinating about this arrangement. It's challenging fundamental assumptions about military training. For decades, military doctrine held that only those with direct combat experience could effectively train others for war. Operation Interflex proves that institutional knowledge, combined with systematic training methods and a willingness to learn from students, can be just as effective. The results on the battlefield speak for themselves. Stenhouse recounted an anecdote that had filtered back to his unit of a previously trained section of 10 AFU soldiers, pushing back a Russian force many times their number, testament to the training provided under Operation Interflex. This success is particularly striking when you consider NATO's recent track record. Strikingly, the same external actors, the United States, NATO, and its member states, failed in Afghanistan but have more effectively supported Ukraine. The difference? NATO, as a defensive alliance designed to deter and defend against a Soviet conventional or nuclear attack, was much better positioned to support Ukraine's defensive war with Russia than to successfully pursue CI in Afghanistan. The Afghanistan experience offers a stark contrast. Security sector reform in Ukraine worked, but Afghan national defense and security forces failed. There is no sugarcoating the collapse of the ANDSF versus Ukrainian security forces' successful resistance against Russia. Building an army with zero likeness to Afghan society was a strategic error that likely contributed to its collapse. With Ukraine, NATO is doing something different. Instead of trying to impose a foreign military culture, they're enhancing Ukraine's existing fighting spirit with improved tactics and equipment knowledge. The Ukrainians already have the motivation and basic combat experience. Operation Interflex just makes them more effective. The training is also evolving constantly. During this time, Operation Interflex has continued to evolve to match the specific threats being faced on the front lines in Ukraine. A variety of training programs have been delivered via Operation Interflex, focused on equipping trainees with the battlefield essentials. The basic infantry course, leadership training, and instructor courses, which continuously adapt to Ukraine's needs. Recently, the training has expanded to address Ukraine's most pressing challenges. The UK-led initiative involves British instructors teaching Ukrainian military personnel how to disable landmines, munitions, and other explosive devices, according to the General Staff's update. The Halo Trust, a non-governmental organization specializing in post-conflict landmine clearance, estimates that up to 2 million landmines may have been laid in Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. The program's success has led to significant commitments from the UK government. The Defense Secretary discussed the training program with his Ukrainian counterpart, Rustem Umerov, in London earlier this week. The meeting also focused on how the UK will continue to ramp up support over the coming months, confirming that $300 million worth of artillery ammunition will start to be delivered by the end of this year. But perhaps the most important aspect of Operation Interflex isn't just what it's teaching Ukrainian soldiers, it's what it's teaching NATO about modern warfare. Key lessons from Ukraine are feeding directly into Western planning as militaries across Europe prepare for the possibility of a future conflict with Russia. This reverse learning is reshaping military thinking across the alliance. Western military doctrine, largely unchanged since the Cold War, is being updated based on Ukrainian battlefield experiences. The implications go far beyond Ukraine. NATO is essentially getting a real-time education in 21st century warfare without having to fight Russia directly. The psychological impact on both trainers and trainees is profound. LT Colonel John Harris of the Light Dragoons said the AFU recruits were fighting against an existential threat, and were among the most motivated he had trained in 20 years of soldiering. Asked by Army Technology what UK trainers could in turn learn from Ukraine recruits and those returning for the leadership course, Harris said that the Ukrainians had experience of fighting a 21st century adversary on the battlefield. This creates an interesting dynamic where instructors and students are simultaneously teachers and learners. Western trainers bring systematic methodology and institutional knowledge, while Ukrainian soldiers bring cutting-edge combat experience and tactical innovation. The program has also revealed some uncomfortable truths about NATO's readiness. Providing training to Ukrainian recruits has reduced the availability of training facilities for the British Army. Army units, which bid for time at the training sites in 2023, had their bids rejected 8 times more often than in 2019 because sites were not available. The MOD acknowledges that Operation Interflex will constrain the Army's capacity to train its own soldiers on its training sites, with more than a quarter of the Army's training estate being used. Yet despite these constraints, the program continues to expand. At a recent meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group on the 4th of June, the Defense Secretary announced that the UK will spend a further $247 million this year on training the armed forces of Ukraine, supporting Operation Interflex's highly successful training programs. This funding not only supports Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression, but it is also vital in ensuring both European and UK security, underpinned by the government's plan for change. The success of Operation Interflex is forcing military strategists to reconsider fundamental assumptions about warfare and training. It demonstrates that in an age of rapid technological change and evolving battlefield dynamics, institutional knowledge combined with real-time experience can be more valuable than traditional combat experience alone. This has profound implications for how militaries might prepare for future conflicts. The traditional model of learning from past wars and applying those lessons to future conflicts is being supplemented by real-time learning from ongoing conflicts. As we look toward the future, Operation Interflex represents more than just a training program. It's a new model for international military cooperation. The UK and Ukraine's allies are committed to supporting Ukraine secure a just and lasting peace. The training effort provided by Operation Interflex aims to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position to achieve this peace and to safeguard their sovereignty and our collective security against Russian aggression. The program proves that sometimes the most effective teachers aren't those with the most direct experience, but those willing to combine institutional knowledge with humility and a willingness to learn. In the case of Operation Interflex, Western military doctrine is being enhanced by Ukrainian battlefield innovation, creating a training program that's more effective than either could achieve alone. This unlikely partnership between battle-tested Ukrainian soldiers and systematically trained Western instructors is not just helping Ukraine defend itself, it's revolutionizing how we think about military training and modern warfare. And in a world where the nature of conflict continues to evolve rapidly, that might be the most valuable lesson of all.